anyone feel like it?
I feel like it.
Go back.
Call this meeting to order. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of Township of North Huron accept the agenda for January 23rd, 2020 strategic plan meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin, I have Paul seconding. All in favor? Carries. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will move on. Reports. 4.1, draft strategic plan, and Dwayne is going to present it for discussion. I believe as we're going along, if anybody wants to just stop Dwayne, and we'll have a conversation at that time as well as waiting till the end of it. It's okay with you, Dwayne?
Yeah, we'll do a combination of the two.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, Council. So the purpose of the meeting here today is to receive input as it relates to the North Huron strategic plan. As Council is aware, a consultant was retained and conducted a 2-day workshop, and then we held a community open house, and we also had a survey. So what you're going to see here today is what has been received from the public in terms of the open house and through the survey. In addition to that, the department heads have gone through it as well, and there's some recommendations from staff as well for council's consideration. So, as the REEF has indicated, the presentation, we're going to go through each individual section of the strategic plan. We're going to outline potential changes that have been proposed by the public. And we're also going to outline staff's recommended changes or some just general comments for council's consideration. At the end of this today, if possible, what we'd like to do is obtain council's feedback. We will go back, make whatever revisions need to be made, and then we'll be bringing it back to council for adoption and for approval. It's important to note that the strategic plan itself will inform the budget in 2020 and also on a go-forward basis for the next 4 years. So essentially what you're doing as council is establishing what your priorities are going to be for the remainder of your term of council. But this plan also goes into the first year of the next council. So, and that's really just so when the new council takes office, that they have something at least to begin with. Just to help frame things a little bit, I've just put together a few slides here about some of the current projects that we're currently working on. It's really just to give you some context in terms of to think about as you move forward through the strategic planning. So right now we have a human resource policy review that is underway. We're in cross-border agreement negotiations. We're working on a new website. Council has awarded that contract, and we've established, or working to establish a working committee to proceed with that work. We're completing the fire hall public works facility in Blythe. We've been doing some work around Hutton Heights. We've been supporting and working with the new owners or the new party with respect to the former A2A development. The Wingham Trailer Park is something council has given some direction on, and we'll be bringing back a report on that very shortly. Decision to be made around the future Wingham Police Station building and the future Blythe Public Works property. And as council is aware, we're working on implementing Laserfish, which is a records management system. We also have the House and Bridge Dam Committee looking at the future of that asset, as well as North Huron Museum, and in both of those cases we have committees established that will be bringing forward recommendations for council's consideration. We've been working on an ad hoc labor and housing shortage committee. Council's had some discussions about investigating daycare expansion in Blythe. The airport is something that we've touched on a little bit, but we really haven't had a lot of discussion about. Recreation master plan was talked about at the previous council meeting, and council has given direction to proceed with that. Staff are working on a special events policy. From a human resource perspective, senior management team is aware and progressing towards succession planning. We're moving forward with implementation of restructuring our daycare, as council will recall. We've applied for funding to conduct a service delivery review, and I'm anticipating and hopefully we'll be receiving word on that very shortly. The strategic plan exercise itself, health and safety policy review, policy and procedure review, that was discussed, as you're aware, at the last council meeting. We're also working on a community safety and well-being plan, which we need to be completed by the end of the year. Community improvement plan grant allocations. We've established a community improvement plan, we put money to it, and that money has now been or will be soon allocated. And as always, we continue to review and update our policies. So in addition to that work, we have our boards and committees. We have our Economic Development Committee, our Police Board, the House and Bridge Dam Committee, the Museum Committee, both the Blythe and the Wingham Business Improvement Associations, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority Board. We attend the Coalition for Hearing Injury Prevention Physical Recruitment Committee. We also have the Sustainable Hearing Committee, the Water Protection Steering Committee, the Wingham Town Hall Theatre Committee, the Alice Monroe Festival Short Story. As alluded to earlier, we do have a Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Advisory Committee. That is a committee that we attend. We have representation on that committee. It's a county-wide committee. We attend the Acute Labor and Housing Shortage Committee meetings. And as well, we have our ad hoc cross-border servicing committee. So, I mean, the purpose, just to, again, to keep this in context as we go forward, but we've had a lot going on in the last year. So in terms of moving on, in terms of the introduction section, the introduction section outlines our goals, our vision, our mission, our values, and our principles. And we did receive some public input from the community survey, and the public input received suggested that the vision need to be more specific and need to focus on the future of the township and not the current state. So taking that in consideration, and just for ease of reference, the vision statement in the draft read, "The Township of North Huron is a prosperous and engaged community that welcomes visitors, families," "The Township of North Huron is a prosperous, engaged community with strong roots in agriculture and culture." Again, we received public input. So based on that public input, this is a revised statement for council's consideration. And as you can see, it reads, "The Township of North Huron is a prosperous, engaged municipality that welcomes visitors, families, and residents through development, culture, and tourism." So maybe we'll just move on.
When can we jump in?
What we'll do is I'll do the first three, and then maybe we'll talk about if that's okay with you.
Okay.
So in terms of the mission statement. The mission statement currently, or the draft reads, "The Township of North Huron strives to offer a high quality of life by delivering excellent and efficient services to our residents, business, and visitors." The public input we received suggested that the wording affordability and sustainability should be reflected or incorporated into the mission statement. So in terms of incorporating that, one way to incorporate that is as follows, that the Township of North Huron strives to offer an affordable, sustainable, high quality of life by delivering excellent and efficient services to our residents, businesses, and visitors. And the last one I'll touch on is principles. These are the principles that will guide the official plan, guide the strategic plan, and guide decisions as we go forward. The public feedback that we received indicated that the public wants to see the words efficient, transparent, and modernization incorporated into the principles that guide the plan. So from a staff's perspective, here's how we could incorporate that. Through integrity and responsible leadership, North Huron implements and maintains policies, practices, and regulations that are focused on exceptional and efficient service, designed to be inclusive and accessible, informed through meaningful and transparent community engagement, focused on growth, development, and modernization while being fiscally responsible, and aligned with our neighbors, fostering fair and balanced partnerships. So maybe I'll just pause there for a second for any comments or questions.
Chris, did you want to start? Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Thank you, Reeve. Through you, Reeve, Dwayne, I guess, and it's for everybody, I don't see enough of a difference between the revised vision and the revised mission. Like, it's not a big enough difference, because there's truly different meanings for each of them, and I think it should be worded a little different. And I do feel that agriculture should be mentioned somewhere, because, you know, it's one of the wards, and it's a big player in our municipality. So, you know, going to the meeting in Belgrave, there weren't many farmers that actually showed up there. So, you know, if more of them did, then the results would have been different.
Yeah, and again, this is input that we received through the community survey, and what we've done is just try to incorporate the public input into the various mission statements. But by all means, in terms of if we can stay with what was originally proposed, if we wish, we can work with what we have here. So it's entirely at council's discretion in terms of.
Yeah, I like what is the revised statement I like, but I really miss the importance of agriculture that is should be represented in the statements and in the vision and in the mission. And there's no mention of nature either. We have a beautiful nature center. We have lots of forests and river going through our township, so I think that should be mentioned as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't that in our original mission statement?
There was the agriculture piece in the original vision statement. There was the piece about culture and agriculture,
Yeah.
and so a lot of the public feedback that was received was that they wanted to while agriculture and nature are our assets, the vision is supposed to be an aspirational statement. So that's kind of where Lura Consulting, that's kind of why they drafted up the way they did, to kind of where do we want to be, not neglecting what we already have, but so.
Yeah, and I feel like it's agriculture, culture, and nature are neglected in this one. I do agree with the other one, the revised one, but it needs to be a little bit more,
Wordy.
more, yeah.
And so if I could just ask, and I agree with you folks, can we make that change right now, or do we have to come back to?
No,
We can make whatever changes we want
Okay.
now.
So, Chris, Anita, let's add to that then. For the agriculture part, where would you like to put that in? And we'll all work together to, as a council, to formulate it. Did you want it in the vision, or there's, let's see, vision and revised statement?
Well, the vision is what we see, you know, down the road. So we want a strong agriculture. If it's in the mission part, we want it to be
Healthy.
a healthy agriculture, rural life, business, however,
Sector?
sector.
Just by adding it after development, just in agriculture, culture, and tourism, would add it to simply add it to the current vision statement, or revised
Yeah,
statement.
you were talking about different things.
So, if I'm understanding that right, then you wanna go with the Township of North Huron as prosperous, engaging municipality that welcomes visitors, families, and residents through development, culture, and tourism with a strong agricultural background,
Base.
base,
Yeah, perhaps.
or,
Yeah, so you could, through you, your worship, so you could add it right before development even, right? So that the Township of North Huron is a prosperous and engaged municipality that welcomes visitors, families, and residents through strong agriculture, comma, development, comma, culture, and tourism.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like that.
Thanks.
we're all good with that?
And then in terms of any changes to the mission statement, I know that was mentioned, I just didn't know. Before we move on.
So the revised statement is the Township of North Huron strives to offer an affordable, sustainable, high quality of life by delivering excellent and efficient services to our residents, businesses, and visitors. Are we fine with that as a council? Or would somebody like to,
Well, it's all present tense, so that's correct.
Yeah, I think it encompasses everything.
Okay.
If you look at Ron, if you.
great.
Okay, so moving on then, economy. So we're gonna go through each action item, and you'll see that some of the action items, there were no comments, and from the public, and from the staff's perspective, we had no comments either. But if the public has made comment, or if the staff we have comment, that's what we'll bring forward, and we'll talk about. But certainly, if there was no public comment, and staff doesn't have a comment, but something that you want to discuss, by all means raise it. So in terms of under economy, it says, the action item is to complete and maintain an inventory of properties and promote them as appropriate in the municipality with a focus on the following. Municipally owned lands that could be developed. This is a little hard to read. Vacant buildings and their current land use designation and ownership, and lands that could be purchased by the municipality for housing development purposes. So there were no comments received from the public with respect to this particular action item, but from a staff's perspective, we do have 3 comments for council's consideration or thoughts. So in terms of the vacant, the municipally owned lands that could be developed, as council is aware, we have that inventory. Previous council meeting, we brought forward that inventory, presented that to council. In terms of vacant buildings and their land use designation ownership, we understand this to be basically non-municipal buildings. And then in terms of lands that could be purchased, again, lands that would not be owned by a municipality. In terms of the inventory that is beyond the municipal lands, as staff, this is going to take a significant amount of resources to do. And just in terms of, we'd be looking for some additional short-term, I'll call it, assistance to put this together. One is creating it and putting it together as a whole, but then the other more challenging is in terms of continuing to maintain it and to keep it current. So if this is a priority for council, and not necessarily have to give an answer right now. We can talk about this later on when you have an opportunity to have a look at the whole plan. But there's going to be resources that are going to be required to make that happen. In terms of lands that can be purchased by the municipality, from a staff's perspective, as council is aware, we're currently working on the Hutton Heights development, and we're supporting and advancing the former A2A lands for housing development. So from a staff's perspective at this point, those 2 developments, in terms of them coming to fruition, will certainly address our housing need in the immediate term. So in terms of in terms of acquiring more land, again, from a staff's perspective, we don't see that as a high priority. We think we currently do have sufficient lands. In our minds, the higher priority is to get the developments that we've got in the works, to get them moving. But again, I mean, if that is council's desire to move ahead with one or both of those, we're just sharing from the staff's perspective our comments.
Comments or questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
I agree with the removal of the portions in red from the statement.
Anyone else?
I agree with that.
Go ahead, Chris.
Reeve, we do have vacant buildings, so,
Oh, you're talking about town-owned.
yeah.
Yeah.
The police, and then the museum building itself, so we should really have a plan or decision
This-
what to
And
do.
this is
with
the
that.
non-municipal ones.
Sorry.
This is the private lands,
Yeah.
putting staff time to private land.
Oh, okay, pardon me,
Um,
I still don't see it, but,
Yeah, this is about privately owned lands, and I'm gonna agree with Kevin because we're not real estate salespeople. And lands come and lands go in different ownership. We are doing an inventory of what we could possibly use. Dwayne and I were at the county yesterday for a couple hours working on that. But I don't think we should be taking a lot of time and becoming a real estate company. I think we have lots of land to work with and lots of land that's already been identified that we can pursue as time goes by, but definitely. And to give you an example, when we're going to do our new website, I clearly said that I would like to see a place on it where the real estate companies can be on there with their commercial and industrial lands. But they will be the ones that will be monitoring and keeping up with it. It's not going to be our staff. It's just gonna be a link to them. So if somebody wants to look at North Huron to locate in, they can come to the North Huron site, they can click on real estate, but we're not going to monitor that or have anything to do with it. It will be an outside sources if they wish to be part of it. So I'm with Kevin. Any other thoughts on it? Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I agree, we should not be in the realty business. Just, we have enough lands of our own that.
To work with. Any other comments? Okay.
So, in terms of, there was significant feedback received from the community survey requesting the addition of this action item, and the action item is to restore the house and pond dam. And purpose would be to attract tourism to the township. It says staff and council, long-term, and the measurable is restoration, whether it's completed or not. From a staff's perspective, in terms of the word itself, restore, in our minds, already predetermines the outcome of that asset. And there's been a committee that's been established to make a recommendation to council. So we're recommending that instead of say restore, that it says finalize the decision on the House and Bridge Dam. And in terms of who would be involved, the House and Bridge Dam Committee and Council, obviously. We view this as a short-term versus a long-term. Council has given the committee 12 months to come back with a recommendation. Measurable is whether decision has been made, so that will determine whether or not we've satisfied the strategic plan objective. And as well, in terms of the risk and liability, whether we've successfully managed that or not. So if council agrees with those proposed changes, or if council would like to see something different, we're certainly open to feedback.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Reed. 2 points. I do agree with the changes, but I also disagree with it being in the economy specific item. No other group, the museum, the library, or anything other group has a specific line in the of any more importance to the community than any other. So singling out the decision-making group is unnecessary to be, I think, to be in the economy section, unless you're going to list all of them. So that's my, but if you're going to list it, I agree with the changing, it should be changed for those reasons. But I really don't see reasoning for it to be a specific item.
The museum, we'll get further on, it's mentioned as well specifically, just to give you that advance, just so you know.
For decision-making, like for,
Yeah, so later on, under, I believe it's services, there is an action item there specific to the museum. But just so you're aware.
but I'm just curious why the bridge would be in our economy. It doesn't generate anything. So,
I'm gonna let Carson speak to that, and then I'd like Anita to go next.
So-
Clarification here.
Through your worship, the only reason that that one is located in the economy section of the plan right now is because when we had the community survey, the feedback related to it came in the economy section of the survey. So when Lura Consulting drafted a potential action item, they put it in there based on the feedback. If council thinks it's more suited in the infrastructure section or something along those lines, that's a change that staff can easily make.
I think I know where the recommendation came from, and it wasn't from, it was a specific end in mind for adding it, before the resolution was placed before council, from the recommendation from the committee. I'll leave it at that.
Anita?
Yeah, I like the new wording, but I also agree with Kevin, it shouldn't be under economics, but on community-specific action item. I think that's more.
Kevin? Sorry, Chris?
Yeah, I'm really glad you took the restore out, because I was, couldn't sleep when I saw that. So the wording's good, finalize the decision, and good point about, Kevin, about maybe not in the economy and perhaps in the asset. Infrastructure.
Yeah.
So if we can switch
Sorry.
that to infrastructure?
Yeah.
Good, Kev? Anyone else? Just going to the facilities.
I was gonna comment.
Through your deputy site.
Sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Sorry, through your deputy site. I agree with the changing of the wording and as they go down to infrastructure, but for sure, short term is in there.
So we'll make those changes.
Okay, carry on.
Okay, next item. So that, again, this is comments that we received at the community open house and has to do with the airport. And Lura Consulting has recommended this action item be added. And it reads at the top, determine next steps related to the Wingham Airport to make the best use of the township's assets. The staff and council be involved in that long term, and that the measurable is that the next steps to be determined. Staff reviewed this and are recommending that the words "the future" related to the airport be added. And in terms of staff, this would fall under the Public Works Department. And the recommendation from Lura Consulting was long-term, and we think this is more of a short-term action item. So if council's okay with that?
Any okay? Okay,
I agree with
seeing
that.
nothing,
Agree.
seeing,
Medium, you said medium term, right?
Change it to
Yeah.
medium term?
okay.
Okay, in terms of the next items, there were no proposed changes, so we just want to make council aware. neither from the public nor from staff, and question is council being satisfied with the action items. Improve the efficiency and timeliness of the development approval system is one. The second is to collaborate with the county to promote business development opportunities and tourism in North Huron, such as providing information to attract new businesses, industry, and residents to North Huron, and designing and promoting a North Huron experience tour that would take visitors to notable designations throughout the area. Moving on, another action item, review the current amount of funding being allocated to grants under the North Huron Community Improvement Plan and establish a visitor information center at a physical location or kiosk. So unless there's any comments from council, there were no comments received from the public, we will leave those as is.
Anita?
There's still vacant storefronts in downtown areas. Do you wanna keep that in or not? Review the current amount of funding for the community improvement plan. Is that something, because we were talking about vacant buildings and that, having that taken out, do you want it in here? Or don't? Is there a reason for it? Or?
So in terms of the improve aesthetics and a decrease the number of vacant storefronts, so, yeah, sorry,
So-
maybe
Yeah, do we want vacant storefronts in there, or is that,
oh,
do you understand what I mean? Is that something we have to look at as a council, or is that
Yes.
not ours to do?
Go ahead.
Through your worship, so that ultimately that would depend on where council sits on the future of the community improvement plan. So if council wants to continue providing grants through the CIP program, which would be the facade grant that we currently have an intake out for, as well as the potential for a structural grant allocation. The purpose of those grants is to address the vacant number of storefronts, as well as improve the facade and interior of those buildings.
So we as a council don't get directly involved in that, but we have our economic development committee, which you're sitting on, but you're a new member.
Yeah.
And that's where we put allocating money off to the side, and this is something that's happening region-wide, or actually I think all Ontario-wide. I'm not sure where it started. It's been very successful in both east and central Huron. Very, very successful on keeping the main streets lively. So we see it as a very important part of keeping our main streets lively, full, and intriguing for people to shop in.
I understand that, but it's more like if you take it out of the inventory, do you want it into this? But you need it because of the community improvement plan. You need it in here, the vacant storefronts, because they are not municipally owned either.
No.
But I understand where you're coming from, but it's just like, do you want it in here or not?
Through your worship, so the difference between this action item and the previous one is, so that action item was asking staff to develop an inventory, where this action item speaks to basically the continuation of the community improvement plan. So
Okay.
staff don't seek out those buildings, we put out a intake for those, and then the owners of those buildings, whether it's a vacant storefront or they come to us.
Okay.
So ultimately, as Dwayne had mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, how this would inform the budget process. So ultimately, the decision of whether this stays in the plan or not informs the budget process, because if council wants to keep this action item in, it would result in budgeting funds in the 2020 budget towards the CIP grant.
Trevor?
Yeah, I think I think my question, maybe not as simple as Anita's, and I do want to apologize for my being a little bit late here, but the discussion of does reviewing the current funding, are we making a direct tie that however much money you're putting into the CIP is going to potentially decrease storefront vacancies? So if the CIP had $40,000 in it, do we think that's going to relate into, and we have currently 12 storefront entities that are empty, right? Are we saying that if we raise the funding in the CIP, there's a direct correlation to that, then all of a sudden we're gonna have a decrease in storefronts that are vacant? I don't see that being a direct correlation.
No.
So I guess the question is, if the number of dollar allocated to the CIP annually is the goal, and that's the kind of the measurable to understand that what we've done, I guess the other question is are we trying to tie vacant storefronts as a measurable to the success of the CIP? And if we're doing that, I don't think that's correct. So I guess that to me is where, you know, it's great to have a storefront inventory of vacancies and stuff, but if we're trying to tie CIP funding to storefront vacancies, I think we're trying to correlate something that's not going to necessarily be correlated.
I'm gonna follow up with that. Yes, the word vacancy should be taken out of there. It could be an existing business now that would come for storefront and structural upgrades. We had Mayor Bridge from Minto, I believe it was, come and talk to us about how successful they've been 6 or 8 months ago, him and his staff. And I'm just wondering if the word vacancy should be out of that, and then that would make more sense, right, Trevor?
Well, I guess it's the ultimate discussion is what is the ultimate, what is the goal of that? Like, I know what the goal is, but are we trying to tie a measurable to something where it's gonna be very difficult to measure as it relates to the CIP? Because, you know, Minto was a prime example. They're trying to find metrics in order to show their taxpayers that the CIP works. And it works in reinvesting in the municipality by getting these. My question is, do we look at some of those metrics and figure out, is that part of the metrics that we use to ensure that, you know, it's fine to have the end goal to say, here's the number of money we've put into it, but is that really it? What is the measurable that we're trying to get out by having the CIP? What are we trying to show the taxpayer that we're providing taxes back to business owners? What are we trying to give them? Show them that it's working. And I think that to me is the more important part. Not necessarily vacancies, but just what is that measurable?
Through your worship, so to shed light on what Deputy Sype is saying, so the question whether it's just focused solely on the CIP, whether it's improved aesthetics or not, or whether it would actually result in a decrease in vacancies, ultimately it depends who submits those applications, right? So some might use the CIP to improve the aesthetics in the downtown. Some might use it as a startup. And so, for example, we in Take 3 we had a numbered company, and there was a vacant at the bottom of the storefront, and they used it. They used the facade grant as part of their startup, right? So, to answer Deputy Sype's question, it's multifaceted. They use it for different purposes. The reason I think it's worded like that right now is to address the fact that some businesses use it for aesthetic purposes, and some businesses use it as part of to reduce the vacancies.
Chris, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I thought we'd just keep it simple enough and just say it's improved aesthetics for storefronts in downtown, because just the rules of the game, there will be empty stores and somebody thinking, oh boy, I can do something here and apply. So it's an automatic. I don't think we need to mention it.
So we can make that change if that's...
Yeah, so if we make that change, we're good with it?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're correlating the goal to what, and it's measurable. That's.
So just in terms of, to conclude the economy section, the economic development services are provided through a committee model. And the committee provides economic development services with the support from staff. So that's currently our model. Confirm that that's the model we're moving forward with. And then going back to, I believe it was Councillor Van Peterson's comment, the Economic Development Department Committee, as you'll see in the draft 2020 budget, is looking for an increase in their budget for some projects and more specifically for community improvement. And that's something council will have that discussion possibly as early as tomorrow.
Go ahead, Trav.
Rita, the only question I have, and it has to do with the collaboration with Huron County as it relates to promoting businesses. You know, functionally, if an investor wants to come to Huron County and they don't necessarily know where they want to go, and I'm asking this question because I don't know how the county funnels economic development to all the other 9 municipalities, is do they have an inventory of information that is available within the county, not necessarily county owned, but municipally owned, that they can forward, that they can tunnel the information that says, well, based on the information you provided me, I think there's a possibility that there's something in North Huron or Central, whatever the case may be, or are they just giving the potential developer, here's the 9 municipalities in Huron County, good luck to you. Like, I guess the question is that when we want to talk about collaboration, my question is that what, I guess, and maybe it's a discussion about what the county is actually providing as it relates to economic development for new business attraction to each municipality, because I don't know that council, at least I'm not clear about how that works operationally, because I can sense that that's what I would hope, but I don't know if that's the reality of the situation where developers are left to say, well, I'm just going to call all the 9 municipalities and see what they have, versus call the county, see what here's the information I'm looking for, or the things that I need, and the county has contacts in order to say, here's who, instead of wasting your time, here's the places where I think is the most valuable to you. I don't know the answer to that question.
So I'll give you the answer, Trevor, as your county council. No, they do not have inventory. Yes, they will get in the car and drive around with somebody to find a location. It has been before county council a few times. They literally, if somebody was to come to Huron County right now and say, I would like to put a factory up, no, they do not have inventory. We at North Huron are going to go about it in a different direction. We are going to actually have the real estate companies put those on. They're haggling with the fact that they want county staff to, if they're going to do it, county staff to actually input and take off all the inventory as it goes along, which I don't know how you're going to keep track of that. So that conversation has been at county several times, but the bottom line is no. If somebody goes to county and says, I want to build a factory X, they'll say, well, let's go see if we can find you some land. So I think we should stay on the course we're on. As the county develops it, we'll see if we can work with it. Go ahead, Kevin?
So it is essentially a funnel, it's just upside down.
Exactly. 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 Now, I didn't have much to say about that at county either, as you can imagine. Okay, anything else on that? See none. Dwayne.
So next section is on community. So the first action item is to use the new website as a platform to provide information on all recreation, leisure, fitness, and sports programs offered in North Huron, as well as information on the various community groups, service clubs, special events, churches, and community social services available. From a staff's perspective, just within the context of a strategic plan, this strikes us more of an operational matter, and it's actually something that is already being conducted by the staff. Once the new website is in place, this will continue the work that is being done around this, as we move forward. So from a strategic planning perspective, we're recommending, or staff recommend that this item be deleted on the basis that it's more of an operational matter, and it is something that we'll be moving forward with.
Comments or questions from council?
Agreed.
I think I agree too. Kevin's showing agreement. Trevor's showing agreement. Yes, I see everybody shaking their head, yes. It's gone.
Moving on, next item, establish a local youth council to enable youth voice in local discussions and encourage youth involvement. So just in terms of the way this action item is currently worded, it obligates the township to establish a local youth council. And discussions by council previously were to investigate and look at a youth-friendly community. Youth-friendly community may or may not translate into the establishment of a local youth council. So it's recommended that we amend the wording to investigate opportunities to be recognized as a youth-friendly community. That council be involved, the community service department be involved, and community groups and organizations be involved. And in terms of measurable, the opportunities would be presented to council.
Go ahead, Trevor.
So I would tend to agree with the staff in the sense that when I brought this up at the council table, I didn't necessarily indicate a youth council. I indicated I'm looking at whether we're a youth-friendly to investigate the options to become youth-friendly, which under youth-friendly, there's the potential to have a youth council. That doesn't necessarily mean you're obligated to have one. There are lots of other options or other avenues to do that. I think in my mind, that motion has been brought forward. We are typically going to be investigating with a whole bunch of list of options and scenarios that could relate into that. I think in order to, in the sense of staff, we're pigeonholing ourselves to this. We could get a youth council, but not necessarily be youth friendly. So, I think you want to be, in my mind, you want to be youth friendly, and then figure out action items in order to maintain that youth friendliness, so that you can have it for the long term sustainability of having a youth decision-making process within the council.
I'm gonna follow. Oh, anybody else want to speak first? Go ahead, Chris.
The private sector has some opportunities here in town, so that happens. And I think for us to do anything, then you have a skating park, or you do some asset-related thing that makes it friendly for the kids to get off the street and go play with rollerblading and what have you. So that would be something that is a potential, but that's investigating the opportunities, right? Yeah, I see it's fine just the way it is here. Yeah.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. I see the community services, things like the connectors and whatnot, they're taking initiative in that now. So tie them in as you have up there. I think working everybody together would be better.
I just want to follow a bit on that. Right now, what your council does as Reeve, I meet with the grade 10s from schools. I think at the beginning of every school year, and they come here and we have a discussion about that. Your deputy, Reeve, and myself have actually been invited and went to the school up on top of the hill and talked to grade 4s and 5s, was it, Trev?
5s and 6s.
5s and 6s. And I'll tell you something, those kids laughed and we had a great time. I call that engagement because as a child I can remember thinking of the Stuffieville Council, and I should be careful because my brother was on council, but it was a different world. I'm afraid if you ask for a student council, what might happen is you might deter children because they might think they're making a decision that we can act on when they're just kind of shadowing us. So therefore you'd say, we want you to be involved as a council, but then anything they come up with, you're gonna say, well, no, or we'll look into it, and that's gonna I think it's gonna go the opposite way you want. So I like the idea of engaging with them, and I'm sure Trevor had a lot of fun that day, so I'm sure we'd both be more than willing to go to different schools or have them come visit us during, meetings and that. I would call that engagement. Go ahead, Trev.
Yeah, I think we don't wanna get into the discussion about what a youth-friendly community is and how youth are engaged. That's to come back in the report that we talked about. I think the conversation, I think what staff is saying is, this is specifically telling you, in order to succeed this one, you have to you have to have decided to get a youth council. And what I'm saying is, that necessarily wasn't the intent of what I had brought to council, that council voted on at the time. When I had voted is, let's talk about what this means to be youth friendly, and if after we decide that we're gonna become youth friendly, if the 5 action items out of that, and one of them is to establish a youth council, then so be it. But if it doesn't, then so be it. I think ultimately there's lots of information that's gonna be coming back to council with relates to this. I just think, I completely agree that the wording needs to more talk to youth-friendly as it's been communicated to ratepayers at this point, and the direction that council has been given currently. So I completely agree.
So I'm hearing from my council that we are all interested in this venture, except we wanna take the word council out. Is that what I'm understanding?
I think it's ultimately it becomes the investigate youth-friendly.
Okay. I'll make that change, please.
Okay, so moving on, next item is prioritize accessibility in the municipality, and it's to create spaces where anyone can participate fully in township activities. So in terms of this action item, was developed based on public input at the open house. As I'm sure council can appreciate, in terms of creating spaces where anyone can participate, it's going to require some additional financial resources. In terms of accessibility, which we're fully aware of and we need to be compliant with AODA. So from a staff's perspective, we're just recommending a couple changes, just in terms of the council be involved, the clerk's department would be involved, and adding the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee to that as well. And it was identified as short-term, and from a staff's perspective, we feel that that's more of an ongoing item. That's something that it doesn't have an end. It's something that we'll have to continue to work on into the foreseeable future.
I'm gonna open that up to council. Go ahead, Trevor.
The only other part that I thought that, as who should be involved, from coming back from Roma, I would suggest that the province needs to be part of that discussion. Only because we aren't the only one that's asking this question about how is the province going to adjust funding in order to determine how accessibility becomes an important part. If you put the regulation in, how are municipalities going to burden that cost? I can honestly say the question wasn't answered at the forum completely for fact. So
But it was a long one.
it was a long one, but I would say that I think that has to be an ongoing conversation with the province about where that funding is going to come through. Because as we heard from some, business owners and stuff, it's not possible for them to bear the entire cost of these buildings' accessibility based on their operating. And it's going to be a concern not only in North Huron, but it's going to be a concern in Huron County, and it's going to be a concern in Ontario as a whole. So I think province needs to be at least consulted, be it as an ongoing consultation as to how they're changing their thoughts about funding as it relates to accessibility.
Go ahead, Chris.
Through you, Reeve, the word prioritize, I don't like, because it means we should drop everything else and just go at it. I think it should be more that it's our goal to fulfill the regs. It's coming down from the province, and yes, the province has to be included. But when I see that word, you know, it's number one. It's gotta be worked on, and I think it should be better. It's our goal to do it, to fulfill the
My personal
regulations.
understanding of that was prioritize the building we wanna work on in the municipality and work down instead of all over the place. Did I misunderstand that? Not prioritize accessibility as number one, but prioritize where we're gonna do the accessibility first.
Yeah, I don't read it that way.
Yeah. Dwayne, just,
Yeah, I mean, everyone can read it differently. I didn't read it the way Chris read it, but I can see where you're coming from,
Mhm.
so.
We just have to watch our
Yeah.
nomenclature.
I'm gonna throw it over to Kevin now.
I'm not sure whatever word you would use, but removing that, I'm against, only because it's mandated.
That's why it's our goal to do it.
Yeah, but just saying, we'll try,
No.
it doesn't say we're mandated, it doesn't give,
Yeah,
we're
that's-
mandated. We're responsible for doing it
Mhm.
as a township, so if we're responsible to do it when? 20 years from now, if it's not a priority.
Yeah, it's just the word prioritize. Yeah, keep it strong. There's no issue. Like I'm an example. I need better accessibility in certain areas. So you know, I don't feel, you know, it's not out of the question for me to make this an issue. Just the word. Keep it a strong word if you wish. But I don't want prioritize. That means now first.
Okay.
To
So
me.
So let's just go right around the horn and see what each one says. Paul, we're gonna start with you. In or out or comments?
Through your worship,
Yep.
so if you to wordsmith it here, instead of making it read as if it's our only priority, so what about something about making it a priority, make accessibility a priority within the municipality or something like that, right? Because it's not your only priority, but it's a priority.
It's making it sure. I like that.
Something along those lines. And that's up for council.
I think we have time on this, like, there's certain timelines on this. Do we not have time, like 2025? Kevin, isn't it 2025?
Through your worship.
Yep.
So it's, the AODA is a phased-in approach. So each year or each biannually, there's new requirements that municipalities are required to implement. So since about 2010, we've started to see more policies in more areas affected where we're required to act, and so that will continue to that until 2025.
So before we go any further, then would it be acceptable by council as a priority? Or would you like to have further discussion?
You were going around the room, so I don't know.
Yep. Paul?
I'll go with a priority for sure.
I go with leaving it the way it is, only for the simple reason that I think everything that we do going forward should have a priority of accessibility, rather than, you know.
Yep.
I find the word priority indicative of the statement. That's my opinion.
Trevor?
I agree with Councillor Faulkner that I think it needs to be there. I guess the question ultimately in my mind is, or prioritizing accessibility in municipal buildings is what I'm, like, you know, we can't prioritize the accessibility in a ratepayer's building. We cannot prioritize that. That's up to them. We can support how they potentially get funding or whatever the case may be as that. But this is a goal for us. This is a goal not only, so in my mind, it's prioritizing how we make municipal buildings accessible. Not like just our buildings, because ultimately if we're hosting something in a building, it needs to be accessible for all ratepayers and everybody that can come. Doesn't necessarily mean if they're a ratepayer or a visitor.
Okay. Anita?
Yeah, I agree.
Chris?
I would go with what Carson suggested. It's a priority.
Okay. And Rick?
And that's so you can be proactive rather than react.
Yeah. And I'm going to suggest we should go with what Trevor brought forward, because we don't wanna, the way this is written, it sounds like we're gonna dictate to the people on the main street of our little towns, and that's not gonna happen. That's just not in our mandate. So with those changes, we're all good then? So I'm gonna get the clerk to write that down and read that back to us, so we're all clear on what we just decided. Trevor, was it you wanted, how you
Yeah,
wanted
so
that?
just in the action, it would be prioritize the accessibility of municipal buildings.
We're good, guys?
Through your worship.
Yes.
So the AODA goes beyond buildings, right? So I would say, like you don't wanna limit it to just your buildings, right? So your services have to be accessible to, your, like the website has to be accessible. It's not just our built infrastructure.
Okay, well then, if that is the case, you could just say municipal buildings and services, period.
We're all good with that?
Thank you, Carson, for that.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
Okay, so the next action item under community is to complete a community safety and wellbeing plan, and this is an item that came forward from public input at the open house. It's also mandated by provincial legislation, and as I indicated right at the start, this is something that from a staff's perspective that we're currently working on. So no significant changes other than that we add well-being plan to the action item. And in terms of who would undertake that, the clerk's department, the community safety and well-being working group, the community safety and well-being advisory committee. And it was, it's established as a medium term, but this actually, from a staff's perspective, is a short-term item because it is something that have to have completed by the end of the year.
Council, questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll make those changes.
Okay, so the next four action items received no comments from the public, either at the open house or the community survey, and staff have no comments either, so unless council has any comments. The first is to develop a more efficient events approval policy process and market community events in North Huron. The second, which the Reeve alluded to earlier, is to host annual visits to local schools to engage youth on civic engagement. The third is to use the website as a platform to provide new residents with relevant information about North Huron. And the fourth is develop a process and a program to recognize volunteers for their contributions to the community.
Questions or comments? Trev?
The only question I had is that, you know, the web, anything we say that we're gonna be doing on a website, in my mind, isn't that encompassing of the operations of setting up a website? Like, so if you're gonna set up a website, operationally, you're gonna wanna do all of these types of things. And if we're setting up a new website, putting this thing in my mind, is another operational tactic that, you know, as council operationally, we're gonna be part of what's included on the website, because part of our mandate is to ensure that people are informed and transparent. So, you know, from my perspective is that anything we put in there as a platform for new residents, well, we're gonna want that anyways. So, you know, my personal opinion, I would have that removed as another operational idea and incorporating that in the operational of the website design and website implementation.
Anyone else? Anita?
Yeah, like the host annual visits to local schools and educate youth. Can we do that with the youth-friendly community too? Can we move it toward that, or do we want it as a separate entry?
Dwayne?
It can be part of the youth-friendly community, the earlier action item that we had. We can
Yeah.
combine the two.
Trev, just on the, for the volunteers to recognize them, and we've only talked, that should, that's not part of, it's kind of part of the new site we're putting together, but that's also should be physical.
Yeah, no, yeah, that process needs to be a more encompassing process of not only volunteer appreciation from a community perspective, but also staff and council perspective. So, you know, to me, I think we, council, and with support from staff and community groups, figure out what that process or policy or needs to be looked at as to how to integrate that in our community action plan. So I think, you know, I completely agree that it should be remain there. It is completely different, and that is going to be a discussion between community, council, and staff about how we develop that program to establish something that's fruitful, but it's also reoccurring. Not just whenever an event happens or whatever. How do we have a program that you know, reinvests and rediscussions of what our volunteers do for us on an annual basis, on a weekly basis, on a more fruitful time, so that we can make sure that council keeps up to date as to how those supports are being out there. You know, it's great when we have an event, we can thank the volunteers, but we need to be as something as a little more, you know, robust and understanding how those volunteers and what they do for our community. So I think that needs to be an action item just on its own,
Okay.
with a clear, once we get there, a clear mandate, a clear suggestion about how do we do that? How do we make volunteers number one in the community as to recognition and that type of stuff?
So leave that on there. Go ahead.
Through you, your worship, so is the direction we've received is to remove the use of the website as a platform due to the fact that that is operational? Is that council?
That was my opinion. I think if we were removing the other one where it talked about website redesign, it only makes sense that we're removing this one as operational. And again, I think the hosting annual, as Councilor Van Heersen mentioned, is, you know, we could go through the idea of being a youth-friendly community. We end up not being a youth-friendly community, but we want to host events or host visits with stuff like host visits at schools and other things that are going to make community engagement better, but you're not necessarily going to be youth-friendly designated. So I think, you know, that's just another action item with under that youth-friendly that potentially could happen, but it may not. You may do that, host those events without being a youth-friendly community.
Other councillors? Did that answer your question, Councillor?
So if council is in consensus, then the direction we would receive is to remove those two action items from the plan.
Looking at the council, does anybody, I'm seeing some nods here, we're all good? Okay, we're good.
So just to summarize in terms of the community action items focus on youth, accessibility, safety, volunteer recognition, education, information, and developing a special events policy. And from a staff's perspective, these items are achievable. We will have to look at shifting perhaps some duties and responsibilities among the staff, but we don't see any problems with that. So the next one is governance and modernization. So in terms of, and we've touched on this already, the action item is to implement accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requirements. Again, this is a provincial requirement. And from a staff's perspective, just some minor changes. Implement accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act requirements and Ontarians with Disability Act requirements. And in terms of who would be involved, in addition to council, the clerk's department, the facilities department, the recreation department, the Huron County Accessibility Advisory Committee. We have council there twice.
Open it up to councillors, questions, comments, concerns? Clear, Chuck?
I would just add the province of Ontario in there.
Not seeing any other questions or comments, we're all in agreement with that? Okay.
Okay, moving on, the next item, action item, is to undertake a regular, for example, once every 3 years satisfaction survey for residents and businesses in the township. And I'll maybe just note that another action item that we have is at the bottom, to develop a community engagement and communication strategy for the township. From a staff's perspective, community engagement and the communication strategy to be developed for the township, in our minds, that would include a satisfaction or feedback survey would be incorporated within that strategy. So our recommendation would be to eliminate the top action item, undertaking a regular satisfaction survey for residents, on the basis that that strategy will be brought forward for council for approval, and that strategy that's brought forward would include the satisfaction survey. There's more to, when you're doing community engagement and communication strategy, it's more than just doing a survey, essentially, is the point.
Open that up to council. Questions, comments, concerns? Not seeing any. We're all in agreement with the change. Recommended? Okay, that carries.
Okay, so in terms of these next action items, again, no comments from the public. Staff have reviewed them, no comments. I'll just run through them quickly. Support advocacy efforts for the expansion of high-speed internet. Support the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's advocacy efforts for support of rural community needs. Update the town's digital processes, so things like online payment options and updating the website. Implement professional development plans for staff, and evaluate the effectiveness of the current size and structure of council.
Before I open that up to council, I just want to say that at the county level, we're working on high-speed internet too. So I would suggest we put the county council up with the support of the asking for the high-speed internet. Forget what it's called now. Swift, yeah. Yeah, so that is an ongoing concern, and I believe there was, it's been a while since it's been before council, but I do know that the wardens, the western wardens have pushed forward on this, and it is starting through them, so we should be in contact with them and see what's going on. Go ahead, Kev.
I just would like some more, on the last item there, some more information on evaluating the effectiveness of current size and structure of council. What are we pertaining to here?
That's a conversation I think we should have down the future, and I'm gonna suggest things like, do we wanna be an award system? Is literally the size of the council adequate? Yeah, and Carson's gonna speak to it.
Through your worship, so a report like that would fall under the clerk's department. So if this is something that council is desirous of having in their plan, basically that report would potentially look like available options related to the size and structure of council, and comparators to other municipalities, and basically just be information for council to use to do their due diligence of is the current size too big, too small, that kind of thing. Is as Reeve Bailey indicated, is the ward system desirable? So basically this action item would just mean that a report would come forward with potential options and information, and then ultimately, based on that information, council could make a decision to make any adjustments they see fit, or to remain status quo. This is an exercise that municipalities do commonly, just to do their due diligence of their current size and structures.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, oops, darn. I don't like it at all. I think it should be stricken out. And the word effectiveness, that got me there, because it's not that we're dealing with how effective we are. You can throw in other words that that's streamline it a bit, but not effectiveness. You know, right?
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah, we could make whatever changes council.
yeah, it just becomes dangerous. The whole thing.
Ultimately, I think it's just evaluating the current size and structure of council. Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, North Huron votes their council in a certain way. There's 444 other municipalities that vote their council in a certain different way, potentially. Like I know, for example, a prime example is Minto. Minto votes a deputy reeve-in. Council doesn't have that choice. So, you know, there's a whole different opportunity to at least evaluate what this current council is doing, how it's elected, how it supports each other, and how it could be potentially different. If council chooses to leave it alone, that's their choice. But I think it ultimately, my position at least has been, no, if somebody was to say to me that the evaluation of the size and composition and everything about council has not been looked at in 15 years, there's something wrong with it. I said the same thing when we were talking about the police service. It hadn't been looked at since amalgamation. We should be looking at these things more frequently to ensure that we're not just falling into the status quo discussion. Things need to be looked at, policies need to be adjusted, and the only way to do that is to evaluate them. And again, council can make the evaluation to remain status quo, but we need to have the documents from staff and the opportunity to look at it collectively together and make comments and then make that decision together. I think ultimately having our own opinion about the decision without all the facts, or even if we do think we have all the facts, isn't the right approach. I think we need the information provided by staff and then make the decision forthwith. I agree, Chris, it's maybe not the discussion about effectiveness, it's just they're evaluating the current size and structure of council and how they're, and typically how that is. It's what the size is and how they're voted on, how they are brought to this table. So I think that is all part of the discussion that the clerk would bring to us, and then an evaluation would be done by council and determine what the next steps would be. That's, to me, I think the right approach in the sense that it's due diligence.
We'll word it like that then.
Yep, so we will, through your worship, so we will make that change to read, that action item will read, evaluate the current size and structure of council.
Do we have a history? Has it ever been done before?
No.
It hasn't been done since I've been a councillor.
To my knowledge,
And,
yeah.
and I was coming to council meetings for a year before I was a councillor. So it hasn't been done in
Since
at least
amalgamation.
7 years, and probably hasn't been done since amalgamation is my guess.
I think, speaking from my point of view, I think it's great that we'll evaluate ourselves and how we're governing, since we ask our staff to do the same thing, and we evaluate them every year, and we evaluate our policies, so I think it's only fair to everyone that we do the same thing, and for future councils, as Trevor said, they can look back and say, well, these guys had a look at it and they're fine. So I think there's that topic will be a good topic. And I think we should, and we'll be, as Carson said, we'll look at models and that from other municipalities and have a conversation what's going on and go from there. I think it's a great idea. Anybody else? Carson made the changes? Haven't looked yet, have you? Oh, there you go. Move on.
So just in terms of general comments, AODA compliance is a provincial requirement. Development of community engagement communication strategy, that's possible. We'll need to make some adjustments to a position or positions. We'll also need to look at retaining some outside expertise around that. One of the items in terms of action is with respect to implementing professional development plans for staff. We have a human resource policy review that is currently underway. It's happening informally, and I think what I'm understanding is we need to formalize that, and we can do that, I would suggest, as part of that human resource policy review. In terms of government modernization, this is something that the provincial government advocating through funding that they've made available. And we've applied for the funding to do a service delivery review, so there could be some outcomes of that that will be brought to council. As we talked about, the staff report and the composition and size of council, and advocacy, and again, that's something that's ongoing. So just some general overview comments. So moving on in terms of infrastructure, one of the action items is to install physical infrastructure services at Hutton Heights, more specifically the lagoon and the water system. In terms of the present wording, one of the conversations I would suggest that we have to have yet as a council is in terms of what our role is or will be in the development of Hutton Heights. There's some different options available. We can be the developer, or we can find somebody to do that for us. And we haven't had that conversation yet. So just in light of that, the staff recommendation is in terms of amending that action item to read to facilitate the development of Hutton Heights. And that myself and the Economic Development Committee and Council would have a role in that. And further to that, from a staff's perspective, for us, this is more of an economic development matter versus an infrastructure matter. So we recommend moving it to the economy section of the plan.
Questions or comments from the council? Personally, I think it's a good idea to move it, and it is something that we have to now have some strong conversations on, because we're getting it to the point where we're ready to develop, or we're going to get somebody to develop for us. So we need to have those conversations. Good to go for the suggestions? Okay, everybody see a lot of nodding heads, keep moving, please.
Okay, next item is to determine next steps related to the current North Huron Museum. Support the vision of the municipality, and this is viewed as a short-term item. So this action item was drafted by the consultant, and it stems from comments that were received through the community open house, as well as through the community survey. And from a staff's perspective, we're suggesting or recommending that this item be clarified to state that in terms of determining the next steps related to the current museum, and in particular under the category of infrastructure, that the decision is with regards to the future of the existing museum building. We've established our museum committee that is looking at the future location and looking at it in terms of the physical infrastructure, looking at programming and all those sort of elements. So just in terms of the action item, the recommended change would be to state that it would be to determine next steps related to the current North Huron Museum building, be a little more specific. Council obviously be involved, Public Works Department be involved, and the Recreation Department. It's also identified in the draft action item as a short-term matter. The staff recommendation is to more of a medium term. Short-term basically is this year, and I don't think council's in a position to make any sort of decisions. Still, we're waiting for the museum committee to bring that forward for our consideration. And in terms of, this is currently under infrastructure, museum, the building and all that, from a staff's perspective, is more of a community service. It's a service that we provide to the community. The building is needed to provide that service. The question, in terms of what does that service look like, and what's the role of the existing building in that, or is there a role?
So I'm gonna open up to council again. Go ahead, Kevin.
I agree with the changes on here. My injection into the infrastructure specific actions, I would like to see the current dam structure listed in here as well, exactly the same way as the building. It's an infrastructure. That way it puts the onus that the Public Works Department and Recreation, or not Recreation, but the Public Works Department is still looking at it from an infrastructure. Because it has a potential to be segregated exactly the same way as the museum asset is being looked at, possibly going into a public funded by other personnel or by other people. The dam's looking at that exact same procedure. I just wonder whether it would be a good spot to put it in infrastructure and have it it's the same way. Open for discussion. I'm just wondering.
So let's just deal with this one, then we're gonna go right back to the
Okay.
suggestion Kevin made, right after we deal with this one on making the move with the dam too. So on this one here, what's the recommendation from council for staff with the changes they've made? Not seeing anything,
I
so.
recommend this date.
Okay, it's recommended,
I recommend that they as amended.
okay, and I don't see anybody objecting to that, Trev?
No, I just wanna clarify that the recommendation is that is just to change it from to North Huron building, right? And then unless we wanna add the actual service in the community, which nobody has talked about as of yet, then that would be another addition, correct? That's what your recommendation would be if council wished to put the actual museum service in community, because it's not there now. Then there would be next steps from communities or the museum service, then it would go under community. That's what I'm reading in this. It's not there now, right?
This is just the bill.
Right, so I guess my question is that I'm okay with it. I guess my question would be more of, both of these actions have been already given direction by council to come with a proposal, whatever the case may be. In order to make this a little more generic and not specific to an issue that has already been provided to council, I'm wondering if, and I'm just asking the question, so don't shoot the messenger, is maybe determine the next steps for municipally owned surplus infrastructure. Because what I'm saying is, if the determination of the municipal, the museum committee comes back and says, hypothetically, yeah, we think it's a good place to move, that building becomes surplus, that would be then typically, then it would be considered to be surplus potentially, then council would need to make a decision on the next steps of that surplus building, whether it be sell, repurpose, whatever the case may be. The same would go with, potentially with the dam, is if council chose to replace it, great, or not great, whatever the case may be, but it would also then have to make the determination if they're choosing to not replace it and remove it, that in essence is a surplus infrastructure. You're making a decision to physically remove a structure. So in my mind, without specifically being specific to an item, staff have already been given direction by council to investigate these services, which comes with buildings attached to them. And unless I can remember, I haven't seen any other council recommendations to look at any other services that have buildings associated to them as of this point. So if we did that, then that action plan would still fall under those buildings potentially, because they would potentially be surplus municipal buildings. I'm just thinking by having it too specific here, we're adding action items that we've already provided direction to staff, and we're already going to get a recommendation as to what that decision has to be made. So we're putting action items on a report that ultimately are already going to be coming to us anyways. So it seems like we're making action items just for the sake of making action items.
Through your worship, so the direction I'm understanding here is that this action item instead would read, determine the next steps related to surplus municipal infrastructure. And then, so we previously moved the action item to finalize a decision related to the house and bridge dam to the infrastructure goal, so we would be removing that and just, that would fall under this.
Yeah. Let me be clear, I'm not suggesting that is, I'm not telling anybody that I'm just providing thought as to how we make this a little bit more generic as opposed to specific action items on specific infrastructure.
Go ahead, Kevin.
That's really right. And that was my intention of bringing that forward to insert here, was just to alleviate what you were just saying about it being an action item specific to. That's really the only reason why I was injecting in the dam into this portion, because it sounded like the same thing.
So the way this reads, then both items are going to be, Carson's gonna take care of it with this?
And potentially any other
Any
items,
other-
any other item that would
surplus
potentially
municipal
would come up.
infrastructure that
Okay.
arises.
Okay, so you're good with that, Kevin? That
Yeah,
helps
that's
you?
all, the only reason why I injected that was.
Paul, you're good with that? Because you guys are the committee chairs. You're good with that? Rest of council? Everybody's good with it? You move along. Oh, sorry.
I'm just looking at staff, we're making a significant change here. Does that make sense? Does it make sense to staff what we're asking or what we're saying? I'm looking at, and the reason I'm asking is I'm looking at Vicky and she's got the look of death. Only because either she doesn't understand what I'm saying or there's something or doing that is going to impact something that staff is going to do.
Look behind you.
Like, okay, I just don't know. I'm just looking at staff too. I don't wanna, council, we shouldn't always just dictate, I think, and without getting staff.
We're gonna start with Sean and then we're gonna go to Vicky.
That change would make sure that surplus infrastructure, such as maybe the one that's right behind us, doesn't sit and idle. Because it's then on the strategic plan, it's something that is a priority for staff to move to council. That's the way I read it anyway, so I think there's tremendous merit in the wording.
Good?
Through your worship. I'm fine with the councilor side. I just want to make sure, because there's reference to the committee, that everyone understands is that the mandate of the North Huron Museum Committee is not to look at that building. Okay, they're just making a proposal on the move of services, the museum services. They have nothing to do with the building across the street.
Yeah, and I think by changing, in my mind, changing the wording, the who is responsible for doesn't change. It really doesn't change at all, because it still is Public Works and still is council to make those determinations of surplus assets. And therefore, the committees still have a responsibility to only deal with their terms of reference and their mandate. They don't have any, they have particularly no input into what is going to happen to those infrastructures based on their mandate.
Okay, good. Good. Move along, Green.
Okay, next. Continue to maintain township recreational spaces and facility is the action item. This action item was drafted by the consultant, and it is the result of feedback received from the community survey. You're gonna see later on in the strategic plan, development of a recreation master plan under services. And as well, we have an action item to develop a community engagement and communication strategy for the township. The recreation master plan, we don't know what the outcome might be. It may recommend changes to the township's recreational spaces and facilities, or it may recommend maintaining status quo. The way the action item is currently worded basically requires council to maintain the recreational spaces and facilities that exist. So if you have a recreation master plan that recommends some changes to it, your strategic plan doesn't enable you to make any changes. So for that reason, and on the basis that it says continue to maintain township, staff are recommending that we delete this action item.
Council. Go ahead, Kevin.
Agree in most parts, but by taking it out, that leaves an opening to let facilities fall in disrepair, and that would affect the equation of whether they're in good shape and whether they're useful and whether they're, you could let something fall and rise and fall on its own merit, but it could change the outcome. I think we're fiscally responsible for maintaining what we have spaces anyway. I just think by striking it though, it's, well, yeah, that would fall under any infrastructure, maintaining your infrastructure. But I just think striking because there's a master plan coming.
We're gonna go to Chris, then to Trevor.
Yeah, I think the wording's okay, Dwayne, because you're basically maintaining facilities that are there. So if the rec plan says get rid of one, okay, that's what the plan did and we agreed, but we're still maintaining what's there.
Trevor?
Right, but are we just, is that on an action item that should be incorporated into the budget anyways? Like, you have the infrastructure already, the intention is you to be establishing a budget to maintain that infrastructure. If you can't maintain the infrastructure based on a budget, you have to make changes. And by saying maintain, you're physically saying to every ratepayer, anybody here is saying, okay, we can't change or can't get rid of a service or a space or a facility because you said in your strategic plan you're maintaining them. You're not changing them. Maintain means not change. So I think my concern is that if you're actually telling them that you're setting yourself up for spending $50,000 on a recreation master plan that you're gonna put on a shelf and say, well, I don't care really what it says because we've said to the ratepayers of North Huron, whatever it says, we're maintaining and we're staying the course. So it would be fine if the rec master plan came back or any other plan come back and said, you require an increase because you've maintained existing. But I can't see that, and by saying maintain, I think you're opening yourself up to any person and any ratepayer and anybody saying, well, your strategic plan says you're gonna maintain, and I guess that's okay, but the ratepayer needs to understand what that means also. Because if a budget increase of 12% is required to maintain, are you willing to accept the 12% increase for a maintain? I doubt it.
So before we go any further, then it could be just a simple word change. And I'm wondering if Carson, if you had I'd like to address that.
Well, through your worship, so Councillor Falconer, it seemed like you were more speaking to the upkeep of these facilities while we have them, right? And like the township, as part of our operations, we upkeep our facilities, right? So like recreational spaces, we upkeep our facilities, right? So that is an operational piece to it. So if that's what you're referring to, I would say then I wouldn't necessarily say it needs to stay in the plan anyways. But if it's more to, as Deputy Reeve Sype discussed, maintaining those services and recreational spaces, then it would fall under the recreation master plan.
Yeah, I'd rather see it in the recreation master plan than specific infrastructure as well.
So through your worship, so there's an action item about developing a recreation master plan. So if council feels that this falls under this, then we can remove this action item.
Other questions, comments, or concerns from council? How does everybody feel about removing this then? Paul?
And going with the recreation plan.
Yes.
Yep.
Kevin?
That's what-
Trevor? Anita? Chris? Rick? Sorry,
Okay.
Chris, go back to Chris.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. It's still council's decision what we do with the rec plan anyways, but, so.
Rick? No, I'm good with it too, it's fine.
So in terms of other action items under infrastructure, there's 4. Again, no comments from the public, and no comments through the community survey, and staff have no comments. The first is to replace the current standpipe in Wingham. The next is to develop a fleet replacement schedule. Third is to complete infrastructure mapping of all infrastructure. And the last is to update the asset management plan. And this would include a review of the current conditions of the township's facilities and needs, an audit of the road conditions and related infrastructure, the road resurfacing schedule, and also a 10-year capital plan to establish savings targets to meet capital management needs. So unless there's any questions or comments from council, those will move forward as they are written.
Council? I'm not seeing anybody putting their hand up, so we'll move forward.
So again, just in terms of general comments, as council's aware, we have an infrastructure deficit. It's something we need to keep in the back of our minds. Council has done a review of the water and the sanitary rates and has made some adjustments to assist with the infrastructure deficits. We do have many buildings and facilities to maintain, so just in terms of heat, hydro, roofs, all that, just again, these are things to keep in the back of your mind. We do have low assessment growth, so that limits our ability in terms of maintaining our infrastructure as we move forward. And asset management capital plans, that's something that the asset management is mandated in the capital plans. We'll work from a staff's perspective, that's something that we have been working on and we're continuing to work on as we move things forward. So you'll see more around that as we go ahead.
Just want to comment on one thing that's with conversations I'm having with other mayors. The asset management plan is very, very, very important, because as we go forward very quickly, when we want to get funding from the Ontario government or the federal government, they want that in place. They're not gonna give us the funding. They're gonna say, what's going on? You guys have no idea, don't ask us for money. I think I've said this before and I can't stress it enough. It is something we have to work on, get ready, and be prepared, because we're gonna be asking for money for whatever we wanna do, and they're going to come back and they're going to say, we requested this of you. There was a reason, because we're trying to bring everything under control and financially stable, and you guys aren't doing it. So it's a big one you wanna keep on the front of your thoughts.
So in terms of services, the first action item is to undertake a review of rates for township provided services. Again, no comments from the public, either through the open house or the community survey. From a staff's perspective, we're having a little difficulty just in terms of understanding this action item. On an annual basis, each department goes through and reviews our current fees and charges. We just completed that in December of this year. To ensure that they align with the services that we're providing. And just in terms of, not clear, I guess, in terms of this is something that we currently do on an annual basis. In terms of leaving it in the strategic plan, perhaps if we could provide some clarification in terms of what it is that council would be looking for.
I'll throw that open to council. Who'd like to speak to that? Go ahead, Paul.
To you, Reeve. I'm not even sure if I brought it up or not, but for instance, are we maybe, my thought on that, are we charging a high enough rate, let's say for the theater up here, if an outside group comes in? We're at a set rate, but it's something new that's come up. They've improved it, whatnot, they want to come. Just maybe little things like that.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, I'm, and I don't know whether it's council or staff or both, is that when we get the report for the review of fees and charges, and it says no changes, maybe council is not sure of what the, like, what did we use to review, like, what did we use to review against those charges to, that staff is not recommending a change. So, you know, even though staff may not be recommending a change, maybe council wants to make a change. And if we don't have the data or the information in order to make that change, we can't even recommend a change because we don't know what information was used to review the change originally. So, you know, I think ultimately sometimes staff do the review, and I completely accept the staff do the review, but, you know, council ultimately has the right or the choice to change what staff recommends. And if staff doesn't provide all of the data as it relates to how they've come back to the change, council doesn't have that opportunity to adjust the thoughts, because maybe council for a political reason or whatever would like to charge more and has every right to do so, but they don't necessarily have that right because they don't have all the information associated to the review of the fees and charges. So I think, so maybe that's just an operational perspective, Dwayne, as opposed to actually putting it into this, that when council has provided the information about fees and charges, that even if staff says no change recommended, that we understand what the criteria was used in order to ensure that the rates are fair, and we then have a choice to make that change if we so choose.
Anyone else, councillors? I'm gonna do a bit of a follow-up right after Trev on that one. I don't believe this should be on here either. I think it's just a working idea. I think where we're going with this is, I think there's a question of when we decide whether we're going to or not make a change to any financial structure on services, are we comparing it with other municipalities about the same size or doing the same thing around us? I don't think we're seeing that when something comes forward. It's just we're making a recommendation not to. So I think what I heard from Trevor, and I think it's a thought I've had, is that when that kind of a recommendation is made, we could say that we have investigated other arenas, daycares, services around us, and this and this and this are where they're running, and that's why we're making that recommendation. So I think that should just be information to staff, and I don't think it has to be on here. Comments, questions, or concerns from the council? We're okay to pull that off?
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing everybody nod yes.
So in terms of the next item, conduct a service delivery review is the action item, and as council's aware, we have applied for funding to undertake the review, and we've issued the RFP, and we received those results back, and we'll be reviewing those, whether we get the funding or not. Just from a staff's perspective, in terms of changes, recommended changes to conduct a service delivery review contingent of external funding. Just wanted to confirm that that is in fact what council's intent is with respect to that action item. That consultant would be involved as well as senior management team, council, and the public. And that this would be a short-term item, something that will complete this year, again subject to the funding. If we leave the action item as it is, conduct a service delivery review, medium term, it obligates council to complete it. And perhaps that's council's intention regardless of whether we get the funding.
I'm gonna throw that open to council too. I do believe it was on the idea that we were going to get the grant. So I'm gonna throw that out to council, how they feel about that. I think that would be a good change to make, guys.
Yeah, the intent of the direction was to only do it if we got funding.
Yes. Okay.
So we're just clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, support local public housing initiatives. Help lower income earners and families access and or afford housing. So there were no comments from the public through the open house or through the community survey. From a staff's perspective, just in terms of public housing, the way we understand that is that this is in reference to the public housing that is within the control and jurisdiction of the county. That's what we're understanding, interpreting that to mean. And if that is the case, from North Huron's perspective, save and except for the Reeve, who sits at County Council, we don't have a lot of ability or control over public housing initiatives. We can certainly advocate at the county level and or at the provincial level. But so on that basis, in terms of if that is the case, if we're understanding that correctly, there are some recommended staff changes, which would be to support the county's local public housing initiatives through advocacy efforts for more public housing to be located in North Huron. And on the basis that it's for advocacy, we don't, from a staff's perspective, necessarily view that as a medium term. We view that as an ongoing item that we would advocate on an ongoing basis. And then the question then is, the measurable is, did we advocate for public housing initiatives in North Huron? So I'll leave that,
So
that's our understanding.
Yeah, I'm
based on the
gonna
current
start with
program.
that one, cause I have been working on that one. I have approached county council, have not had official meetings with this. But I think the answer right now is they're spending a lot of money in Godrich, so it could be long-term. We're just happy if they keep their buildings up there and running now. My thoughts behind this were with the Hutton Heights project or with the, what's the new term, Zambi? The new developments that
Searson Development, let's just call it
Okay.
that.
let's call it the Searson development. Especially going back to the Hutton Heights for a minute, and especially since at Roma they talked about leasing the land underneath and somebody building the houses. And I see ideas there that if we own the land and we leased it, and I don't know how they do it, we'd have to investigate. Somebody could actually build a house out in Hutton Heights for $250,000, because they're not gonna give us $100,000 for the land. That is a house somebody can afford to. That is exactly what all of Ontario is saying has to happen. We can pull it off, but we gotta think outside the box. I was thinking more along the lines of something like that. There are different avenues we can take. Behind the scenes, we have been talking to different people and coming up with different ideas that will come before council. Right now, they're just still too far in left field, but I wasn't talking about the county at all. I wasn't even thinking about the county. I was thinking about North Huron developing affordable houses, because we have the opportunity, but it's tied up, it's called the Bluffs up in ACW. So ACW has 400 houses that were built there, and their tax rate is just beautiful right now. It's not the farmland, it's this 400 house development. The way it works is the developer owns the land, he puts the house on top, the person buys the house, and then they pay a lease. And in that lease, you can cut their lawn for them, you can do nothing. There's a wide variety of things you can do. But it created affordable housing. And I'm thinking we could follow that lead with Hutton Heights or with our Searson development by sitting down and talking with them. The other thoughts I had, and a few of us at Roma, Trevor and Chris and myself were talking about this, is I'm not sure how much control we have. I thought we had a lot of control on if a developer buys that, can we suggest that he does, I thought we could suggest that you build this type of house here and here and here. So we wanna make sure we have that control, because if we don't, both these developments we're talking about could end up with $500,000, $600,000 houses on them, which is not going to help the problems we're having with the acute labor shortage, and it's not going to help with the problem of people living on the street. I think we have to have some kind of handle on it, some kind of hand in it, where we can say, okay, that's great, but we wanna do this and this and this, and before we give the permit, that's what we'd like to the developers. That's what I had in mind when we were putting this together, nothing to do with the county. So having said that, I will throw it out to council. Go ahead, Kevin.
Through your ear. I think just simply by removing the word public out of the initiative for the strategic plan, because supporting local housing initiatives is the heart and soul of what we want to do, whether it's whatever development it is. As long as it's a key part, and we could say when we check the box off, when we do something at council, yes, that's on our plan, is to support local housing initiatives. It doesn't have to be public housing, pinholes it into one structure. I think it needs to be here, but I think it would just alleviate that word public, and that would still keep it in the mainstream.
Okay. We're going to go to Trevor, and then did you have your hand up? Chris is next.
Yeah, and I agree, and I would say based on the discussion, or based on, knowing that the county is almost in the midst of, or probably starting their 5-year official plan review, which then will flow down to the lower tiers and understanding what their official plan was gonna look like. We need to understand what changes are gonna be potentially being asked about those official plans, in order to maybe potentially request some changes in order to help support local initiatives that we're trying to do at the lower tiers. So, I think I would agree, if we could take out the word public, then it talks about council supporting local housing initiatives, no matter whether they're public or private or whatever the case may be, but to the end goal being to get low income and affordable housing initiatives within the municipality on the forefront.
Other comments? Chris?
Yeah, that just bothered me when I originally read it, and I think we need to be able to support all types of housing. We want, and my question was similar to yours, what control do we have when a developer buys a chunk of property? Do they just do what they want to do? I don't know. So hopefully we do have some controls. But I really, it's so important to me that we have a range, all types of housing. The initiatives and the ones that are thinking outside the box. We heard some good ones, why not? But we need to attract all types of people. And our labor force is probably one of our key thoughts that we should be thinking of.
Nita?
Yeah, I think I agree with Kevin that taking the public out of the housing, that would solve a lot of issues, problems.
Right.
The public's gotta come in.
Okay. Did I miss anybody?
Ditto.
Paul? Ditto with it too? Okay. I think that was a consensus. Just on that note, I think we're gonna be shortly, we'll probably have to have a conversation about development. Not everything's kind of up in the air right now, but we will bring the council up to speed on the stumbling and the work that Dwayne has been doing feverishly.
Yeah, and just perhaps Deputy Reeve cite our 5-year review of our official plan is this year. So we'll be bringing that forward, which is
it's a perfect opportunity.
Which is going back to Reeve Daly's comments, where we're looking to do some shifting in there, given the situation that we have right now. So moving on, in terms of our next action item, is to explore the feasibility of the relocation of the Blythe Library to the Blythe Community Center. Again, no comments from the community open house or through the community survey, but from a staff's perspective, the way that's currently written, it limits council's options in terms of if it is council's desire to investigate and look at other possible locations to house a library. That action item, as it currently written, has already made the decision for you. So we're recommending that, and it's there, to change the action item to read, explore the feasibility of the relocation of the Blythe Library to a location where the township is not required to pay rent, if that is the wish of council. Offer a one-stop shop for community services that limit the township's expenses. And in terms of who would be involved, the thinking would be senior management team and council. We view that as a medium term, which is no change. And in terms of the measurable, it's whether feasibility is explored. So in terms of bringing the report to council and having that discussion.
Put it up to council, Paul.
I go with how it's reworded there, for
Oh,
sure.
I see Kevin's
Same.
agreeing. Anyone else?
Right.
I see a lot of head shaking yes. We can make those changes.
Moving on, and we've touched on this already, development of a recreation master plan. In the action item in the strategic plan at the present time, it makes reference to long-term. We did discuss this recently at, if not the last council meeting, the council meeting before. This is something that we're looking to do this year. So proposing to change it from long-term to medium-term. There were, for council's information, we did receive numerous comments through the community survey. And a lot of those comments from a staff's perspective fell within the scope of a recreation master plan. So based on that, and the consultant reviewed those comments and hasn't recommended or isn't recommending any changes, feels likewise that the master plan itself will address the comments that were received through the community survey. So there's just one minor change there.
I'm sure council's all good with that as we move along. Yep. Oh, sorry, Chris.
For any of these, does it give us a timeline? Like when it says short term, that's making, like coming up with it within the year. But does it still leave us open that we enact what we want when we can, type of thing?
I'm gonna let Carson answer that one.
Through your worship, so those timelines are, there's a section in the beginning of the plan that outlines what those timelines are. So short term would be 2020, so that would be the stuff we'd be incorporating in the 2020 budget. I believe medium term was 2021 to 2022 range, and then long term would be the end of 2022 to 2023 kind of thing. These are just, like, ultimately these are our target goals, right? If it's something that ends up not being feasible to come within that time frame, there's nothing limiting council from doing something in the short term that was set for the medium term or kind of thing, right?
Okay.
Or and vice
Leaves
versa.
it open then.
Yep.
Alright.
Just a quick follow-up on that. When we started this whole process and we had conversations, the last time I was involved in this when I was on council before, some of the targets were like 500 years out. This council took the attitude of what can we do, how can we afford it, and let's do it in our term. So with any luck, most of these will be done or almost completed before the end of our term without burdening the next council. So I think everything that we've talked about so far and everything this council and the staff and the citizens that got involved, I think we've all decided this time that it's realistic. We wanna have realistic goals and realistic targets and things that we know that our staff may be able to reach. Having said that, you never know when there's that bump in the road or some compressor that burns out. Anyway, just to throw that in there.
But, yeah, when you say we don't wanna burden the next council, I agree, but we don't wanna burden the taxpayer.
Oh,
either, so
absolutely,
it's a
absolutely.
it's
This is a
careful mix in
common
here.
sense approach where we can reach these goals.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of the remaining action items under services, again, no comments from the community, nor from staff. First is to continue to be involved in physician recruitment efforts. The next item is to continue to deliver public education, fire prevention, and fire service programs. Third, review service agreements with neighboring municipalities and amend as appropriate. And the last is to explore the feasibility of expanding daycare services in Blythe. So again, no comments from the public or staff. Does council have any changes, comments?
I'd just like to touch on the daycare situation. I actually just spoke with Val a few minutes ago before the meeting. The county has received money to, we're gonna put money into more daycare spots. So Val's going to look in to see how that would financially help us move that forward. So I'm not sure if we wanted to add the county to that, so that we're all aware it's just not a situation where North Huron is living alone in that one. Chris?
Yeah, regarding the, reviewing the agreements of neighboring municipalities, I see it as short-term, but isn't it kind of ongoing?
Just to address that one, there has been some concern amongst some of our negotiators about the length of it. We had a meeting with them a little while ago. We may have, they were public meetings, you can watch them on YouTube. It's going to come to a conclusion, I think, shortly. I am not speaking on behalf of my council when I say it, or as the Reeve, as Bertie Bailey. Time's up. The direction will have to be made by Morris Turnberry. I don't think our team is happy with what we heard at the last meeting. Having said that, if they so choose to build their own water system and their own septic system and sanitary water system around Wingham, we're fine with that. We will be good neighbors. And we'll have a discussion about that another day. Go ahead, Trevor.
I would agree, Chris, when you say ongoing. However, I think the discussion would be, we have to review not only with, this is not a discussion of just Morris Turnberry. This is a discussion of Central Huron. This is a discussion of, ACW. This is a discussion with all of them. And I think when we talk about short term, we want the original review of those agreements, the discussion is short term, meaning we want all those reviews done this year.
Put it to bed.
And then discuss whether those terms are 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, whatever the discussion is. And then there is a discussion that makes sure that they're evolving and they're always, because I will tell you, we still don't have, we don't have a cross-border services agreement with Central Huron. Like, we don't have one. It's just, it was talked about and then never talked about it again. We had an original meeting and then it never went. So there's stuff about that stuff that we want to have and make it standard across the board, that we're not having these individual agreements with one municipality but not having them with all of them. So, and maybe we don't need them, but we need to have the discussion, and staff needs to be given direction about how that works. So I think from a short term, we need to make sure we've got the ability. And then once that ability is there, we have those agreements that are standardized across all our neighboring municipalities. Then the discussion about ongoing is it won't be on the action plan anymore, because they'll just be coming up as agreements come due.
That's what he needed to hear, yeah.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? See none.
So just in terms of general comments, just as we move forward over the next 4 years, things to keep in mind: what services do North Huron residents need? What services do we provide to our neighboring municipalities, and at what cost? The Recreation Master Plan will certainly inform moving forward, as well as a service delivery review. Again, that's subject to funding. So those items all will play into how we move forward with our services in the municipality. In terms of the environment, the first action item is to continue the tree planting program, and the department would be Public Works, as well as the county. This is viewed as an ongoing item. The current wording, again, from a staff's perspective, is that the township will continue with the tree planting program as is. And in terms of that program as is, there is a cost to the municipality. And there was a bit of a discussion at one of the council meetings in terms of should it be done on a cost recovery basis. So in terms of from a staff's perspective, what we're suggesting in terms of changes to that action item would be to review the township's involvement in the tree planting program. So it kind of leaves things a little more open. You may or may not decide, and who knows what it might look like. Certainly, council needs to be part of that. And it's written in draft form as an ongoing item. From staff's perspective, we view it more of a medium-term item. We need to make a decision so we can inform our residents in terms of what the program is going to be and what it's going to look like as we go forward. So I'll leave it at that at this point.
Kevin had his hand up.
Does the tree planting have any impact, or does the municipality have any responsibility as far as the carbon neutral, reducing your footprint? Does that play into? Do we have a requirement as a municipality that we have to do services like that in order to offset?
I'm gonna put that back over to Carson, he may have an answer.
Through your worship, so in regards to legislation at this time, I don't think there is anything requiring the municipality, and Sean might be a better person to.
Through you, your worship, under ORAID 39711, I believe it is, our only obligation at this point is to monitor and document carbon footprint through hydroelectric consumption as well as natural gas use. So it's looking more at greenhouse gas, and that's reported on an annual basis.
Chris?
Reeve, along the same lines as Kevin, it's the cheapest and most visible way of showing our environmental stewardship and reducing carbon footprint, because it's not going to be long before it's going to be down our throats, reduce your footprint, and I just think, whether we want to have cost recovery, fine, whatever, but I think that we should still have it available. You've got review the involvement. Well, that's kind of losing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should be continued.
Continue the township involvement in the tree planting program on a cost recovery basis?
Sure, if you want to do that, yeah.
I'm just.
No, but then it's not a cost to the township.
Okay,
Or
I'm
a
gonna
reduced rate or something.
Sorry, Chris.
Sorry.
I'm gonna go to Trevor first, then to Anita.
My concern, my question is what when you say review, that could be an increase. Like the review would provide recommendations to council as it relates to we maintain status quo, increase or decrease, depending on what criteria we provide staff as to what we want. Want cost recovery, or we don't want cost initiative, or we want to make money off the deal, whatever the case, whatever strategy council wants to do, a review of the plan of the service would indicate that, and for that environment would indicate what we're willing to provide. So, continuing the tree planting program says we're going to continue it. Well, that tells me we're just going to continue it the way it is today. But, in saying the review, maybe you're exactly right, Chris. Maybe from between now and when, in 3 years, maybe the Ontario government changes a regulation that says you have to maintain or you have to change how you're reporting stuff so that your carbon footprint is zero. Well, then if we don't say we're reviewing it, that means we're not indicating that we're going to change it to meet the needs of what we need. So I like the wording how it says review. If we review, if we say review and the report comes back that council dictate or asks for cost recovery, then we ask for cost recovery. That's part of the implementation of the review once we have that staff report of what the tree planting program is as a whole. I think I would rather us have the directions be open-ended so that council can get the report and if we say we're gonna keep something, that means it's there. It doesn't matter what council says, it doesn't matter what staff comes back, we've already said in our strategic plan, we're keeping it.
Anita?
How is the county involved with the tree planting program? shouldn't it be the Midland Valley Conservation Authority, shouldn't they be involved in this, so? Because they have tree planting programs as well, so maybe we can work together, or?
As the representative for the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, could you maybe follow up with that and find out what I have no idea.
Well, they have a tree planting program, so I know, but I don't know how the municipality is involved with that, or
Okay.
not at all, or why the county is in here.
Okay, I'm going to switch this over to.
Through your worship, so that at that bottom point on the screen there, you'll see, it says that the proposed changes would allow the township to explore available options, and when SMT met, we were kind of the view that by reviewing this, we could look at what role the township is playing, right? So maybe the township's role is just to promote the purchase of trees and directing people to the NVCA, that kind of.
Yeah, I just know that we discussed this months ago and it basically died. So reviewing it doesn't feel good to me. If we honestly look at it again and look at all aspects of it, perhaps I can live with that, because did we not basically kill it?
I'm
For the
gonna ask-
year we did.
I'm gonna ask Sean to speak to it.
Sure.
Sean?
Thank you, through you, your worship. Yeah, by no means has it died, it's just, we've been doing some of this behind the scenes, exploring and investigating options, and what we're finding is, to do it right, it's potentially a lot more complex, and maybe voluminous than, just putting an order in October for a tree in the spring. So we have, as Public Works, been talking through various options, including how do we deal with it rural? Is it a take a tree, replace a tree? How do we deal with it in the rural versus the urban? So it's far from there.
Okay.
It's just far from simple.
Fair enough. Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
So just to clarify then, leave as is?
Review. As you,
No, as you.
As you
Oh.
as
as
you
written,
edited it.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, moving on, next action item, explore opportunities for waste reduction and diversion at township facilities. No comments received from the community, either through the open house or through the survey. From a staff's perspective, we note that it's specific to township facilities. So we're recommending that it be broadened to, and I'll just read it there, explore educational opportunities for waste reduction and diversion in North Huron. So again, not just township facilities, it would be looking at opportunities for waste reduction and diversion in the municipality. Public Works Department would lead that. It would be something that would be on an ongoing basis. And the goal would be, or what we'd be looking to achieve, is an increase in our marketable recycling.
Council? Recycling is a touchy one right now. Go ahead, Trev.
I would say the way you recommended it's fine. I think the concern that's going to be is how is this educational going to change with the thoughts of ratepayers on how the infrastructure is determined today. So currently, right now, we have Blue Box the way it is, and other municipalities have a different system. So those exploring those educational opportunities isn't going to change potentially how people are recycling, in a sense, because the municipality is mandated bi-weekly recycling pickup. That's what we've done. We've experienced that, and now we've got some educational on how to divert what is stuff that is now potentially going to go into landfill as opposed to in the recycling box. So I think this one is going to go encompassing of what council determines on the next contract for waste services. Because I think those educational opportunities will happen when you talk about what that service is, whether it be bi-weekly, weekly, wheelie bins, a whole bunch of other scenarios that are out there. I look at this one as being inconsistent of that discussion. So I'm not sure that it's ongoing. I think there's some short-term educational things that we need to support the ratepayers on how to make the transition into not putting stuff into a plastic bag. But I think operationally, there isn't the infrastructure at residents now to support a bi-weekly if we have to maintain the current that we're doing. So there needs to be a discussion between the current service that we're offering as well as education, because I will tell you what's based on what I'm hearing is it doesn't matter what educational things you tell me, I can't support a bi-weekly pickup is what I'm hearing. The amount of recycling that I have, it doesn't care what you tell me. I'm not going to be able to put it in that little blue box, and I don't want to buy a big one. That's what I'm so I think it's ultimately a discussion about what service we're offering, and then tie the educational part into that.
So I'm gonna speak as Paul, and then I'm gonna come to you. So on the provincial level, they're trying to get it changed over so that the municipalities will no longer pay for recycling. Now, as a new player at the game, I'm not sure how long this is going on or how long it's gonna take, but they're basically saying the people that are creating all this recycling should be paying for it. So we're also going to be colliding with them as we go along, so I'm not sure if maybe we should have the province involved in this too, and so we can see what they're mandating and what they're talking about. Because the situation, and going back to local, the situation is, all of a sudden, some plastics are and some plastics are not recyclable. So I'm gonna get Sean just to talk to this for a second, because I think we're getting dinged big time by putting stuff in the recycling that's not recycling, and therefore our taxes are getting beat up. But going back to education, I don't think the town understands the situation we're in. So I know there's a lot of fluffer about the change we've just made, and I understand all the comments, but it's driven, I believe, by costing. And Sean, could you just follow up if I'm on track on that one?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and you're absolutely right. We've had to respond to data and information that was given to us that is showing that there's a tremendous change in the recycling world, in that market. The offshore market is all but dried up, as I understand it. And one of the problems is that the small amount of recycling that makes it to market, makes it there because it is very clean. So we've had to look at this whole education piece to try to bring people up to speed on what is recycling, what isn't recycling, and equally important, what ruins recycling. So, and that's where a lot of this push right now in this discussion on education is, let's focus on recycling better, recycling higher quality products so that we ensure that when you put it out to the curb, it makes it to market. Otherwise, as you said, we're getting into debates, a fairly strong debate with service providers about the fact that they're losing money because of the contamination, which means that cost should be rolled through to us. We're already seeing it at the landfill. Contaminated bins are charged back against us with a fairly hefty service fee, which is driving costs for the municipality up. So I hope that answered the question.
It did. We have to bring this to the public light of why we're not the bad guys because we said you can't put plastic. Just plastic doesn't belong there. And the confusing part is some does and some doesn't. So, Paul, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just, when's our contract up for that?
Through you, Your Worship, we're going out to tender this fall. It's going to be a very challenging tender to write because, as the Reeve mentioned, there's some fairly significant changes coming at us very quickly on how recycling is handled. Tender goes out this fall. Contract is up in May, so we have to have, it's such a big change that we have to get it out this year so that we'll be ready to do the conversion for April, May.
So if we could put one message out there to our constituents when we're talking, they have to clearly understand, there's a lot of talk about going to the wheelie bins. Two things, the cost of the wheeling bin is not going to be free. Your taxes are gonna go way up, I have no idea what they're worth. Secondly, the most important, just because you've got a bigger wheelie bin does not mean you get to put the plastic bag in it, because guess what happens? It goes to the recyclers, and they're gonna write a bill for us. It's gonna come back and cost us a bloody fortune in taxes. So the whole problem, we need to educate the community that we're not being the bad guys, we're really being the good guys, because this plastic is no longer accessible by a world much larger than North Huron, because there's no North Huron recyclers, guys. And they're saying, we don't want it, and here's the bill because you sent the wrong stuff. So it always falls into the category you hear all the time where, I want to save the world, I want to recycle, as long as you do it. My life's not going to change. And it just drives me crazy. Anyway, I won't yap on. Anyone else like to speak to that? Seeing none? Go ahead, Wayne.
Oh, sorry.
Through your worship, so do we have direction to make the proposed amendments
Yes.
as on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Seeing yes.
Okay, next, explore the possibility of adding more electric vehicle charging stations in the township. No comments received from the community on this action item. As is currently written, this item does have financial implications for the township. The township is currently paying for the power that is used to supply the electric vehicle charging station that we have. And that is at a cost to the taxpayers. The municipality is paying that bill. The newer electric vehicle, and I should maybe qualify in terms of, we have, I'll call it an older electric vehicle charging station. The newer electric ones that are available are on more of a user pay system, and you're seeing more and more of them in the community. So what staff recommendation is in terms of just adding the phrase on a cost recovery basis. So it'd read, explore the possibility of adding more electric vehicle charging stations in the township on a cost recovery basis. The Public Works Department would lead that, and in terms of a medium-term item, and investigate and look at the new technology that's out there.
Richard?
I first of all want to thank the municipality for the hydro that I
We're waiting for that.
Where's your car right now?
It's right there.
What's his car?
It's my car. But I do agree. I think, once that replacement required, if I think cost recovery is the right approach. I think it's what's necessary that has to happen. So I agree with the change that's going over.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it's a necessary change.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charlie.
I'll take it while I can get it.
Yeah, I know you will. What do they cost new? A station?
There's two types of stations. There's the low speed that this gentleman's using for 3.5 hours. Everybody's switching to the high speed, and I think they come in at $40,000 a piece, I think.
What?
We're looking at it at county, and we're looking at putting in, I think, 15 slow ones and 5 high-speed ones. Although the reality is, if you're gonna pay for something, you're not going to sit around for 3.5 hours if you can get it done in 20 minutes. Then you also make more money as a town because it's 20 minutes when you're paying, rather than one guy sitting there tying the gas tank up for 3
Are
hours.
there grants at all?
We can look into that. Kevin?
I've seen an increase in privatization or private companies installing in front, just to bring people into their establishment. It's an incentive. You can park in front of my store. There's a plug there. Just and at their cost. So
Tim wanted to
the
do that.
municipality doesn't necessarily have to be in the refueling business. If it's an initiative for entrepreneurs to use their initiative to draw people to their places.
Because reality, 30 years from now, there's going to be electric stations just like there's gas stations.
You have to know.
Every home.
Yeah, in every corner.
Yeah.
Things are appearing on the left and down.
Oh, yeah. We have direction on that.
And I put all my money into extension cords.
So our next action item is to, under environment, is to strengthen the township's procurement policy to increase priority of sustainable and/or energy efficient products. And it's just a comment from staff's perspective, and so council's aware that this action item will have financial implications for the township moving forward. The township's existing procurement policy does have an environmental component in it. In terms of increasing the priority of sustainable, that is possible. We can make that amendment and we can build that into the procurement policy, but it will result in increased cost for the procurement of goods and services. So we're really seeking council's confirmation that you wish for this to remain an action item in the strategic plan.
I'll open it up to anybody who wants to start. Go ahead.
Yeah, anytime I read that it's gonna cost us, it's a bother. And do we have an idea? How much more, percentage, anything?
Through your worship, I think the idea in terms of the procurement policy is it's recognized so that if you had two similar, and Donna, please interject if I'm off on this, if you had two similar products, but one was energy efficient, whereas the other one would do the same job that wasn't, the nod would go to the energy efficient product wherever possible.
At any cost, or should there be a limit there?
It would be factored in, you know, for example, if I'm putting an RFP together, and this is part of the strategic plan, energy efficiency should be included in the evaluation matrix and have a value to it. So it's not at any cost, but, you know, say out of 100 points, 5%, 5 points are awarded for energy efficiency. So that may tip the scales slightly in one direction or another based on that. It's not a be-all, end-all. One's $100,000, one's $47. Oh, that one's energy efficient, we're going big. But it's something that would be considered in the process.
Trev?
So in saying that, then the answer that says it will result in increased costs, it really should say it may.
Has the potential.
Because if, it depends on how what value you put to the energy efficiencies in your matrix. So that would be a council determination about how that policy, staff would recommend what that would be as evaluation to how to value a procurement, and we could decide on what that is based on that. So I guess at the end of the day, to me, is it doesn't matter what you, in today's market, if you want to put more onus to environmentally friendly, the municipality is going to pay for it. It doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter where you do, where you go to the grocery store, if it's energy efficient or it's organic, you're paying more. It doesn't matter. So at the end of the day, the municipality has to determine what they're willing to absorb by being energy efficient and controlling their carbon footprint. So I think looking at the policy and exploring what that policy and what the matrix is on energy efficiencies, I think is the right approach. But obviously coming into consideration that, you know, what is our carbon footprint? We need to talk about that. There hasn't even been a discussion at council as to how we monitor our carbon footprint today. So I think ultimately in my mind, that's more of it. I think it would be great to have it. I think it's a longer term thought as opposed to a short term or a medium term. And I think there needs to be a discussion about if we're gonna do this and it's gonna cost a cost, then we need to understand what the benchmark is that we're gonna reduce. If we're gonna say it's gonna reduce our carbon footprint because we put this policy in place, we need to be able to absorb it that we've done that. And I think we can't do that today. So I think to me it's a longer term approach, and it has to go with more of looking at our benchmark as it relates to carbon footprint stuff.
And so he's suggesting switching the word to may. Just before I go to Kevin, Sean wanted to speak.
Thank you, Ruben. Not to belabor it or anything like that, but the other side of this coin is that sometimes they have very positive implications. Coming from the water industry, I would always consider energy efficiency in some of the higher end purchases, and you can save untold thousands of dollars by making that decision at the procurement stage. You pay a little more upfront, but your consumption on that particular unit is so much lower that it pays for itself. So it's a bigger item, or it's a more complicated item, complex item than it looks, and that financial implication can swing in either direction in some cases.
Kevin?
I'll just add what Sean said, this council and staff is already making those decisions, implementing high efficiency lighting, going LED instead of in our streetlights in the arena. They were more expensive than just screwing in a halogen or a highlight or bulb, but they went with those. We're already making those decisions already to go that route, even though it does cost more.
Yeah, so we're just stating the fact.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Seeing none.
So
Gonna make that change to May, I believe.
the May was just, I don't see where May would.
Yeah, May was just in the
That was
recommended
just
comments.
staff
Yeah.
comments.
Okay.
So.
My recommendation was changing it from midterm to
Too
long term.
long,
How are we doing?
We're getting to the end.
yeah. No.
We're
Good,
very
'cause
close
we
to
lost
the
our
end. We lost our audience.
We don't have too much more. Do we let the air? So there's two action items under the environment. One, implement energy conservation efforts in all township facilities relative to Regulation 39711, which includes installing LED lights and adding water energy conservation messaging in facilities. And the second is to implement water conservation efforts in all township facilities, including installing low flush toilets and low flush shower heads. As we discussed, these two items focus on reducing our carbon footprint. And on that basis, in terms of, they're very specific in terms of what it is that we are going to do. Staff's recommendation is to combine them and to create one action item, which is at the bottom there of the slide. To implement energy conservation efforts to reduce the carbon footprint in all township facilities. The goal would be to reduce the carbon footprint. Public Works and Council would be involved in that. This would be a long-term initiative, and the goal would be a reduction in the carbon footprint at our facilities.
So being to council, is that change good with all of council? I see
Yeah.
everybody agreeing. Okay.
Okay. In our last specific, explore the possibility of a township environmental advisory committee. The item is to enable the enhancement of local environmental issues and solutions. Council and the clerk's department will be involved in that. This is viewed as a long-term initiative and in terms of feasibility. So just from a staff's perspective, again, no comments were received from the public. Just as a reminder to some extent that committees require staff time and resources. And in terms of when staff resources are committed to committees, that time is not available to work on council's other priorities. So it's in terms of determining where this fits within your priorities. Staff are currently supporting the Economic Development Committee, the Museum Committee, the House and Bridge Committee, the Police Services Board, the Acute Labor and Housing Shortage Committee, and the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan Advisory Committee. So if all of those committees that we're currently working with, from a staff's perspective, if we were to continue our involvement in its present form, and we were to bring on a new committee, not that it's not a valid committee, we would need to consider looking at some additional staff resources to support that committee. Staff, in terms of, we've got 2 members of staff essentially sitting on our committees and boards. We're limited in our staff number, so It's just in terms of where that fits within your priorities. And if we commit some more resources to another committee, which we can do, the other items in your strategic plan, the timeframes will change.
My recommendation would be only to, my recommendation would be only to explore this possibility when the existing communities are no longer. So, we as council need to review, I honestly truly believe, even before the next council is implemented, I think council needs to look at all the committees again to ensure that the committees are necessary and required, because I know prior to me being, or my first term, there was some committees I was on that I don't ever recall ever going to any meeting. So then the question is if the committee isn't necessary, why do we have it? And then the conversation is that once these other committees are no longer, I think the argument can be made on, is this an important, what priority does this committee have as it relates to climate change and what we're gonna talk about on how it's gonna be coming down the pipe from the province and all that, as it relates to climate change and climate initiatives, so that we can implement and help support that type of stuff. I don't know what the terms of reference looks like in this thing, so that's why I'm saying, like, I know the museum committee, the House and Dam Bridge, the North Huron Police Services Board, those are all gonna at some point be reduced. The Huron Police Services Board is already being reduced to quarterly. So Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee, that's gonna be a year, and then it's gone. So there's gonna be significant committees that aren't gonna happen after a year and a half, potentially. But in that year and a half, there could be other committees that are formed. So I think ultimately, my suggestion is that council keep this one in their back of their head when other committees want to be formed, and to talk about the prioritization of this committee over that committee and see if that's a relatively discussion that needs to happen.
Throwing it open to council. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm the counselor for the Environment Committee, and of course, we're just sitting, waiting for something to do. So we do have a we do have a committee, and just wait. And I do not want staff to be busy doing more things, because you're busy enough. But unless we're pressed into action, I think we just sit.
So I guess the way we want to look at this is our strategic plan for 4 years. So we're not going to come back and add it 3 years. But we all know, and we're hoping that 4 of those committees will disappear in 1 year. Well, 2 of them are definitely going to be gone in 1 year.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we've got to fill up 2 more right away. But I'm kind of hoping 1 will disappear in a year too, but we'll see about that one, Dwayne. So I'm hoping 4 will disappear. So this one we could put on the books, knowing that this could be 3 years out. With that understanding with council. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think if we, in going forward, we should have some sort of a framework for council being on a committee, or a committee of council has to fit into our strategic plan and tick off some boxes so we make sure that they are productive and they are committed to our strategic plan. It's not written anywhere, what those criteria would be, but I think if we add the strategic plan must be incorporated into the embodiment of all committees that require staff.
I don't think there's one of us, especially staff, that like to go and sit there, as Chris said, and not at least go out and feel something's happened, whether it's on a meeting or a yearly basis. It is the worst. That's the part I said I don't want to be bored if I get on council. I was so worried about it, but I haven't had one
I don't
yet.
think you'll find that.
But go to a meeting and sit there and sit there and sit there, and well, like we said at the Roma meeting the other day, half this we've heard already. So we can cut the Roma in half right now for next year, because the first 2 years in a row we heard the same thing. So that's the kind of thing that worries me, and Chris brought that to light right now. But I do think this is something that is something for the environment. We should be. It is going to continue to be a concern, and we're going to need to play a bigger role.
Yeah.
The other thing you're going to end up playing a bigger role on, I'll tell you right now, is your maybe not your hospitals, but your healthcare. it's coming down the pipe because it's getting cut at this level and at the county level, we are going to be forced to support that too. So that's money that we'll talk about like a couple years from now. Anyway, so go ahead, Trav.
But in saying that, I think Kevin's absolutely correct. If we leave this on there, and any time a committee wants to be formed, it is a requirement of the committee to have some type of mandate that's relating to the strategic plan. And if it's not, well, it's not a priority, so we're not informing a committee. So I think, to me, that is an absolute excellent idea. So that would keep, one council, apprised to what their strategic plan is, that says, no, sorry, that committee is not going to be formed in this term because it doesn't meet one of our needs or goals of our strategic plan, then that will be the fact that will be the fact.
We're all good with that then?
So we're maintaining it?
I say we maintain the level it is, it's just we know that that's a kind of direction that, going forward, we're gonna have to maybe make a change to a policy in when it comes to committees of adjustment, like erecting a committee. That part of the review of a committee that says it has some impression or interpretation of the strategic plan. If it doesn't, sorry, committee of council will not. Now, council can write it, but unless it's an absolute necessity, council should not accept that committee of council because it doesn't fit into the criteria of our strategic plan. Because currently, right now, we can't. We just set up committee of council and that's what we do. But it may or may not have any direction as to our strategic plan, and what's the point?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Just really, there's several on the list and several that will be in the future, that council has the ultimate decision. It's our decision. Regardless of what these committees are doing and we're spending money on, say, we're using them as information that, or I don't know, or appeasement, for lack of a better word. That really we're spending money over our decisions finally anyway. So some are very very important economic development. I mean that helps everyone. But we do have, if we had that core, I agree with having a core statement saying that it has to fit.
Yeah. So it sounds like that one's staying in, but we know that's back burner. Dwayne, we're not gonna burden our staff.
So just a summary of the environment, minimal public comment or input was received on that. In terms of the action items, we will to redirect some staff resources to address, there's 7 action items there. And we've already talked about, in terms of if current boards and committees continued, but we've had that discussion, so that's good. So moving on, just in terms of, we're to the end. Yay.
Good, because I want to go home and read my budget.
John is proud there.
Just in terms of, just from a staff's perspective, the strategic plan is short and concise with measurables, so that's good. The action items, they're ambitious. There's a number of action items in there. But they're achievable. We just need to make some changes internally or operationally to achieve them. And as I said, we'll look at some staff and some adjustments, but it's not impossible. The strategic plan charts a path forward for the next 4 years, so it kind of lays what we're going to be working on the next 4 years. And starting as early as tomorrow, council and staff, I would suggest, should start using this draft to start guiding our decisions regarding the 2020 budget process. That's the whole purpose, or one of the purposes, behind this exercise in terms of what are your priorities, and in terms of dedicating resources, both staff and financial resources, in terms of moving forward. And I guess just finally that the public, as you move forward with this strategic plan and you make decisions this year and years to come, that your decisions that you make this year, you will see the effect or the impact of your decision made this year on next year. So as you move forward with implementation of the strategic plan, as you make decisions based on this, your priorities, then the public should see that in the next budget year. So it depends in terms of the decisions that are made.
So what Dwayne is saying is in our last year, we spend all the money we want because it's the next council that, anyway.
Pro quid quo.
So just in terms of next steps, and maybe just to wrap up, the feedback that we received today, we'll incorporate that into a final draft plan. We'll bring that final draft plan back to council. It won't be, I don't anticipate, on the 3rd.
Through your worship, so we had originally talked to Lura Consulting about the 3rd, but based on the recommended changes here, it might be ambitious, so it could be either of the February meetings.
But for sure, by the 18th, we'll bring you back a final version based on the comments that you provided to date. And then once you've adopted it, then we will start aligning our priorities to your priorities, and we'll begin referencing the strategic plan in our reports as we go forward. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Council, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Let's go all the way around the table again, and now I'll do it all the time, Chris.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Go ahead and well, go on.
Anita.
Anita.
No, I
I'm
would like
sorry.
to thank staff for all the work they put in it and made it way more workable for everybody and understandable. Thank you very much.
Chris?
Yeah, nice job, staff, and I think our input was very constructive, so I'm proud of this.
Rick?
Ditto.
You learned something today.
Yeah.
Paul?
Thanks again, staff, for doing this. Carson's going to have one sitting in our desk so we can look at. I think, as you say, it's not going to get in a corner, and we got to blow the dust off. It, as Dwayne alluded to, that we're going to be looking at it, decisions that are going to come down the road. So, thanks. Good day.
Kevin?
Yeah, I want to start to thank the facilitators for this and the staff for working on it. It's nice to see, and it's much more, or much easier for a councillor to talk to his constituents with, as you have implemented earlier. Now, when when you get something from council, it has it underneath it where it fits into, what strategic plan it kicks to, and because sometimes you're out there talking to the public and you forget where exactly that fits in, and knowing, right off the bat, we have something to look at to be able to say, this goes under this heading. This is why we're doing it. And our commitment, or your Reeves commitment, right from the beginning of council to implement checks and balances. This goes a long, long way to adding the checks and balances that we can put a footprint on the ground and say we're moving forward. Thank you, staff.
Trevor?
I have nothing further to add.
Ditto.
Similar.
I just want to thank the council and the staff and the community at large that participated in this. This is definitely a workable piece of scripture. So I think it'll be great for us to use it. It'll keep reminding us of where we want to go. And I'm not going to talk any longer because supper's almost on the table. So thank everyone. Having said that, I'm going to go for confirmatory bylaw number 08-2020. Do I have a mover? I have Paul, I have Anita. All in favor? Carries. Adjournment that the Council Township of North Huron agrees there being no further business before council. The meeting hereby be adjourned at 4:55 p.m. Do I have a mover?
Yep.
Rick? Paul seconding it, and all in favor. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
So see you tomorrow.